There is a desert in this country where 12,000 mirrors turn in silence to follow the sun and focus its light onto a single tower that glows like a second star, a railway built so high above the earth that the train must pump oxygen to its passengers to keep them conscious. A city carved from a frozen river every winter, cathedrals and palaces of pure ice, built, lit, and melted back into water by spring, and mummies beneath the sand, 4,000 years old, with red and blonde hair that no historian can fully explain. Most of China's story is told on its coastline. This film is about everywhere else: the steppe, the desert, the plateau, the ice, the edges of China. Beneath the grasslands of Inner Mongolia lies something of enormous strategic importance to the world: rare earth elements. The 17 metals essential to the manufacture of smartphone vibration motors, electric vehicle batteries, wind turbine generators, and precision guidance systems in military equipment. The city of Baotou processes approximately half of the world's entire annual rare earth output. China controls close to 70% of global rare earth mining and roughly 90% of processing capacity. A concentration of strategic resource control with implications for every electronics manufacturer and defense contractor operating on Earth. The Tuoke Power Station in Inner Mongolia is one of the largest thermal power generating complexes in Asia, a facility of scale that explains why Inner Mongolia, despite its sparse population, has historically been one of China's highest energy-producing regions. A grassland that powers the cities and supplies the metals inside every phone on Earth, from land most of the world assumes is empty. But not all of Inner Mongolia is grassland. To the south, the Kubuqi Desert has spent centuries advancing, shifting dunes swallowing roads, villages, grazing land families had worked for generations. Since the start of this century, engineers and farmers have fought it back, 1 square meter at a time. Rows of solar panels raised on frames above the sand, shading the ground beneath them, just enough for shrubs to take root in their shade. The panels generate electricity. The shrubs hold the dune in place. Beneath a single solar farm here, a desert that once buried roads now grows licorice and grass. A country that could not stop a desert from moving decided to put it to work instead. Kubuqi is not the only desert Inner Mongolia has to offer. 900 kilometers west, in the Alksa League, a stretch of sand holds 2 things that should not exist in the same place: the Badain Jaran Desert. Its dunes are the tallest stationary sand dunes on the planet, the largest, Baotou Peak, rising 460 meters from base to summit, taller than the Empire State Building's steel frame. And scattered between those dunes, more than 100 lakes, not seasonal pools, permanent lakes, fed by groundwater rising through the sand from below, some fresh, some so mineral-rich they glow pink or blood red, depending on the season and the algae blooming in them. Nobody fully agrees on how water, this permanent, survives inside dunes this tall, in a place this dry. The desert's own name, in Mongolian, means mysterious lakes, a description written by the people who have lived beside them for generations, without solving the mystery either. Walk the right dune under the right conditions, and the sand itself begins to hum, a low, resonant tone, audible from more than a kilometer away. In 2024, UNESCO agreed this earned protection as a Natural World Heritage Site, the first of its kind in Inner Mongolia. The tallest sand on Earth, holding water it should not be able to hold, making a sound it should not be able to make, and still further west, in an even harsher stretch of the same desert belt, the sun itself has been taught to do something stranger than generate electricity. West of the steppe, the grass gives way to gravel and sand, the Gobi, one of the emptiest places in China, and the site of one of its most ambitious experiments. Near the old Silk Road oasis of Dunhuang in Gansu province, 12,000 mirrors stand in concentric rings in the desert, each one turning slowly through the day to track the sun across the sky. Every mirror reflects its light onto the same point, the crown of a tower in the center of the array, 260 meters tall. The focused light heats molten salt inside the tower to over 500 degrees Celsius. The glowing salt is pumped into insulated tanks, where it holds its heat for hours and is used to boil water, drive turbines, and generate electricity long after the sun has gone down. A solar power station that works in the dark. From a distance, the tower's crown burns white against the desert sky. Travelers on the highway describe it as a second sun that never moves. If a power station that works in the dark is why you are here, the like button tells YouTube to find more people like you. And a few hundred kilometers east, near Jiuquan, the desert wind has been put to work on an equal scale. The Jiuquan Wind Power Base, one of the largest wind farms on Earth, spreads thousands of turbines across the Gobi in rows that run unbroken to the horizon. Driving past it takes the better part of an hour. The turbines do not end, they simply fade into the haze. 600 kilometers east, in a different stretch of the same desert belt, China fought back the sand with something far cheaper than mirrors and turbines. Ningxia, on the edge of the Tungur Desert. In the 1950s, China's first railway through open desert was being built here, and engineers gave it 30 years before the sand buried it for good. The fix, invented on site, bundles of straw pushed upright into the sand in a simple checkerboard grid, 1 square meter at a time. Each square traps the wind inside it. The sand stops moving. Then it stops being sand at all, crusting over, holding moisture, letting grass take root, square by square. That railway is still running today, 70 years past the 30 it was given. The technique has since spread to deserts on nearly every continent on Earth. A tower that bends sunlight, a wind farm that does not end, a railway saved by straw, laid out 1 square at a time, by hand. For 2,000 years, this desert belt was something to survive, the emptiest stage of the Silk Road. Now it is being converted, mirror by mirror, blade by blade, and square by square, into an engine. But the Silk Road left more in this desert than emptiness. It left people, and it left the dead. In China's far northwest, where the country extends so far westward that it is closer to Istanbul than to Shanghai, lies the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, the largest administrative division in China, covering 17% of the country's total land area and bordering 8 countries. Its landscapes range from the Taklamakan Desert in the south, the second largest shifting sand desert in the world, to the Tian Shan Mountains in the north, whose glaciers feed rivers that irrigate this otherwise arid territory. A highway runs through the Taklamakan Desert, directly across its center, for over 500 kilometers. On both sides, rolling sand dunes that can be taller than a 6-story building. The road is maintained by crews working continuously to remove the sand that blows across it. Drive it on a windy day, and the desert reminds you it was here first. The people of Xinjiang are primarily Uyghurs, a Turkic ethnic group speaking a language related to Uzbek, Kazakh, and Turkish, whose cultural traditions carry the deep imprint of the Silk Road that passed through this territory for over 1,000 years. The city of Kashgar, near China's western border, holds an old town rebuilt in the old Islamic style, covered bazaars, mud brick-style mosques, carved wooden doorways, looking nothing like the rest of China. Beneath the desert's sand dunes, archaeologists found mummies 4,000 years old, with red and blonde hair, preserved features, and tartan-like woven fabrics. The Tarim mummies belong to a people who lived here long before the Silk Road, long before China unified, long before any written record of this place exists. Their origin is still actively debated. Sure, 1,000 years of arrivals, traders, empires, languages, the unexplained dead, layered into one desert. Not every mystery here comes from what the sand hid. Some of it comes from what the desert forced people to build. East of the mummies, in the Turpan Depression, one of the hottest, driest basins on Earth, parts of it lying below sea level. Farmers needed water from mountains they could see, but could never walk to. So, over 2,000 years ago, they went underground. The Kares system, thousands of vertical wells dug by hand, linked below the surface by tunnels that carry snowmelt from the Tian Shan Mountains across dozens of kilometers of open desert, without a single drop lost to evaporation under the sun above it. More than 1,100 of these systems still exist. Chinese tradition ranks the Kares wells, alongside the Great Wall and the Grand Canal, as one of the 3 great engineering projects of ancient China. The only one of the 3 you cannot see from the surface at all. 4,000 years of arrivals above the ground, and 2,000 years of water moving invisibly beneath it. This desert has never once been empty. Xinjiang's desert is only half the story. In its far northern corner, where the region touches Russia, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia, almost close enough to see one border from another, the landscape changes completely. The Altai Mountains. Kanas Lake sits inside them. A crescent of glacial water that shifts color through the day, from turquoise to jade to steel gray, depending on the angle of the light and the silt stirred up from below. Locals have reported a creature living in its depths for decades, a Chinese answer to Loch Ness that has never once been confirmed and never once stopped being repeated. 30 kilometers away, Hemu village, wooden houses roofed in bark, built by the Tuva, a nomadic herding people, distinct from the Uyghur majority elsewhere in Xinjiang. In autumn, the birch forest around the village turns gold, and the whole valley is reproduced in paintings and photographs more than almost any other landscape in China. This is still Xinjiang, the same province as sand dunes 6 stories tall, and a desert highway that never stops fighting the wind, just one mountain range away from all of it. Xinjiang's edges do not stop at lakes and mountains. In the far southwest of the region, the Karakoram Highway climbs out of Kashgar toward the border with Pakistan and keeps climbing. At Kunjarab Pass, the road tops out at 4,693 meters. The highest paved international border crossing on Earth. Engineers building it lost hundreds of lives to landslides, avalanches, and altitude alone, cutting a 2-lane road through some of the most unstable mountain terrain on the planet. It has been called the 8th wonder of the world by people who have built the other 7. At the crossing itself, a single gate, a police post, and an ATM, the highest cash machine in the world, because someone, somewhere, decided that even at this altitude, commerce should not have to wait. 2 countries, one of the least hospitable borders imaginable to put a road through, and China paved it anyway. And south of all of it, the land climbs to the highest place a train has ever been asked to go. What follows is the China of extremes. A railway above the clouds that breathes for its passengers. A tropical island at the latitude of Hawaii, inside the same border as Siberian winters. A city of ice, built and demolished by the seasons themselves. And a final destination that is not on the earth at all. The edges sharpen from here. South of the desert basins, the land rises and keeps rising onto the highest plateau on Earth. Before the railway even starts, the plateau announces itself. Near the city of Xining, Qinghai Lake spreads across the grassland, China's largest lake, a body of salt water the size of a small country, sitting at over 3,000 meters above sea level. Further west, a smaller lake does something stranger. Shaka Salt Lake, a shallow crust of salt and water so still that on a windless day, the sky reflects perfectly across its surface. Walk onto it, and the horizon disappears. Cloud above, cloud below, no visible line between the two. This is the plateau the railway has to cross. And across that plateau, China built a railway that engineering schools said could not be built, the Qinghai-Tibet Railway. Nearly 2,000 kilometers of track from the city of Xining to Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. At its highest point, the Tangula Pass, the rails sit 5,072 meters above sea level. That is higher than the summit of Mont Blanc, the tallest mountain in Western Europe. It is the highest railway ever constructed. The air at that altitude holds barely half the oxygen of sea level. so the train carries its own. Oxygen-enriched air is pumped through every carriage, and beside every seat is a personal oxygen outlet, the kind found beside hospital beds, for passengers who feel the altitude pressing in. The ground posed an even stranger problem. More than 500 kilometers of the route crosses permafrost, soil that is frozen year-round, but begins to soften when the temperature of the surface above it changes. A railway warms the ground beneath it. Softened permafrost swallows track. So, Chinese engineers refrigerated the earth. Thousands of sealed cooling rods were driven into the ground along the line, passive devices that pull heat up and out of the soil in winter and block it from returning in summer, keeping the ground beneath the rails permanently frozen. The line was built with 33 dedicated crossing corridors for the Tibetan antelope, whose ancient migration routes the track intersects. Herds now pass beneath the bridges as the train crosses above them. A railway that carries its own air, running on ground that is artificially kept frozen over the heads of migrating antelope on the roof of the world. Humans wanted to take a train to Tibet, so they re-engineered the ground, the air, and the route of the wild to make it possible. And, from the highest place in this video, the journey now falls to the only province in China where winter never arrives at all. At the southern tip of China, separated from the mainland by a strait of water, lies the island of Hainan, China's largest island. A tropical province, the only one in China, whose southern coast sits at roughly the same latitude as the islands of Hawaii. Hainan has white sand beaches, coral reefs, tropical forests, and a climate that does not know what winter means. The southern city of Sanya, sometimes called China's Hawaii, has over the past 2 decades been developed into one of Asia's leading resort destinations. And in the island's capital, Haikou, stands the largest duty-free shopping complex in the world. A complex of retail space so vast that visitors navigate it in sections, drawing millions of Chinese tourists annually, who come specifically to shop here for international brands at prices unavailable anywhere else in the country. China made Hainan a free trade island in 2020, eliminating import duties on a vast range of goods to position the island as a domestic destination for spending that would otherwise flow to international destinations. The result, an island that receives tens of millions of visitors per year, from a country that was previously one of the world's largest sources of international outbound tourists. A country known for factories and megacities quietly built itself a tropics. But tourists are not the only reason Hainan matters. On the island's northeast coast, near the town of Wenchang, China built its newest spaceport, the only one in the country that sits on open coastline. Rockets built too wide for the country's rail tunnels are shipped here instead, by barge, from factories 1,100 kilometers north. Sitting this close to the equator gives every launch a free boost from the Earth's own spin. More payload, less fuel, for the exact same rocket. Every module of China's space station left the ground from this stretch of beach. A tropical island, built for duty-free shopping, is also the last piece of Chinese soil that a piece of the space station ever touched. Hainan is not the only unlikely stretch of China's deep south. On the mainland, in Guangxi, the border with Vietnam runs straight through the middle of a waterfall. Detian Falls on the Chinese side, Ban Geoc on the Vietnamese side. Two names for one continuous curtain of water falling in 3 tiers across a river that the two countries have agreed, by treaty, to share. It is the largest transnational waterfall in Asia, and one of the few waterfalls on Earth where the international border is not a line on a map beside the falls, but a line running directly through them. Bamboo rafts ferry visitors along the river, close enough to see Vietnamese and Chinese sightseers photographing the same water from opposite banks. No fence, no wall, just a shared current and a line neither side crosses. Rice paddies and limestone peaks surround it on both sides, the same karst landscape that runs through this stretch of southern China and doesn't stop for the border either. A waterfall that two countries could have fought over, instead became the one place on this border where the water matters more than the line running through it. But China's coastline holds older surprises too. 4,000 kilometers north, there is a city where the oldest streets are German. 4,000 kilometers north of Sanya, on the coast of Shandong province, sits a city where the streets of the oldest district look like they were transplanted from a German hill town, Qingdao. Germany leased this peninsula from China in 1898, using the deaths of 2 German missionaries as diplomatic justification to demand territory from the weakened Qing government. The lease was for 99 years. Germany occupied Qingdao for only 16 years, expelled by Japan at the start of the First World War in 1914. But in those 16 years, they built everything: roads, a railway, a telegraph system, a waterworks, hospitals, courts, churches, and a brewery. Tsingtao Brewery, founded in 1903 by German and British settlers, is today the second largest brewery in China and exports its beer to over 100 countries. Walk the Badain district today and you will pass villas built in German, French, British, American, Danish, Greek, Spanish, and Swiss architectural styles, most of them continuously occupied since the early 20th century. Stretching across the water from Qingdao is the Jiaozhou Bay Bridge, a sea crossing so long that driving its full length from one shore to the other takes around half an hour at normal speed. It carries one of China's coastal expressways above open tidal water, connecting Qingdao to its western districts without requiring the detour around the bay. 16 years of occupation, a century of beer, and a skyline that kept the villas and outgrew the empire. But no Chinese city was carved up like the next one: 9 foreign flags over a single riverbank. South of Beijing, on the Hai River, sits Tianjin, a city of 14 million people that in the 19th and early 20th centuries became more divided by foreign powers than any other city in China. Tianjin had 9 separate foreign concessions: British, French, American, German, Japanese, Russian, Austro-Hungarian, Italian, and Belgian, each built in the architecture of its home country. Each operated its own laws on Chinese soil. The 5 Avenues district contains approximately 2,300 preserved colonial buildings. French chateaux beside English red brick townhouses, Italian villas across from Japanese merchant buildings, an Austro-Hungarian consulate, a street from a Belgian bank. All of it in China. All of it still in use. Rising above the colonial streets, the Tianjin CTF Finance Center is one of the tallest buildings in China, climbing 530 meters above the city's former foreign settlements. The newest skyline hovering over the oldest architecture, in a juxtaposition that Tianjin offers better than almost any other place. And in Tianjin's Binhai district stands what may be the most photographed library on Earth, the Tianjin Binhai Library. A vast white hall built around a glowing sphere, its walls rising in wave after wave of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that flow from the ground to the roof like terraced hillsides. Here is the detail most visitors never learn. Many of the books on the highest shelves are not books at all. They are printed images of books on aluminium panels because no human could ever reach them. The building is a library and at the same time a portrait of one. 9 empires built their monuments here, and Tianjin's answer was to keep them all and build 500 meters over the top. Further north, the buildings are not made of stone at all. They are made of the river. In China's far northeast, where Heilongjiang province borders Siberia, the winters arrive with a severity that cities in the south cannot imagine. Harbin. In January, temperatures fall to -30 degrees Celsius. The Songhua River freezes solid enough to drive a vehicle across. And every year, from January onward, Harbin holds the largest ice festival on Earth. The Harbin International Ice and Snow Sculpture Festival fills an area large enough to walk for an hour without reaching the same point twice, with structures built entirely from ice and compacted snow. Full-scale replicas of temples, cathedrals, and palaces stand over 20 meters tall, lit from inside with colored panels that turn every structure into a glowing lantern. At night, when the ice city illuminates in blue, gold, and purple, Harbin becomes one of the most surreal spectacles available on Earth without a ticket to another planet. Harbin's architecture carries an older history. From 1897 to 1917, it was built by Imperial Russia to service the Chinese Eastern Railway across Manchuria. The central street, Zhongyangdajie, is lined with Baroque and Art Nouveau buildings designed by Russian architects in the early 20th century. St. Sophia Cathedral, a Russian Orthodox church with a green Byzantine onion dome rising over 50 meters above the street, still stands, now serving as a museum of the city's architectural past. The Harbin Opera House, completed in 2015, rises from the banks of the Songhua River in a form inspired by the snowdrifts that surround it for 4 months of the year. A flowing, organic white structure designed by Ma Yansong that appears to have grown from the ice rather than been constructed on top of it. Every winter, this city builds a palace quarter out of its own frozen river, and every spring lets it return to the water, a city that rebuilds its crown jewel annually and loses nothing. Harbin freezes hard enough to drive across its own river. 600 kilometers further north, in the same province, the country simply runs out of land. Mohe, China's northernmost city, sitting on the Heilong River, directly across from Russia. Record low here, -53 degrees Celsius, cold enough that locals throw boiling water into the air just to watch it freeze before it lands. And on clear winter nights, something happens here that happens almost nowhere else in China. The aurora. Red and green light rippling across the sky above Beiji village, the country's northernmost settlement, visible only because Mohe sits far enough north for the Earth's magnetic field to bend light down to where people can see it. In summer, the same latitude produces the opposite effect, a sun that never fully sets, hovering at the horizon at midnight, before climbing back up without ever going dark. Most of this video has shown China refusing to accept its geography. Mohe is the one place where China simply let the geography win and turned the result into the only place in the country where you can watch the sky itself catch fire. Mohe watches Russia from across a frozen river. 600 kilometers west, in Inner Mongolia, an entire town has built its identity around the same kind of border and turned it into something considerably stranger. Manzhouli, China's largest land port, sitting near the point where China, Russia, and Mongolia all meet. Here, the practical problem comes first. Chinese railways run on a narrower gauge than Russian ones. Every train crossing this border has its wheels physically swapped, car by car, lifted on jacks inside a purpose-built shed, before it can continue into Russia at all. Above ground, the town leans into the border rather than hiding it. Matryoshka Square, a theme park built entirely around the Russian nesting doll. More than 200 giant matryoshkas painted in Chinese, Russian, and Mongolian styles, surrounding a hotel shaped like a single doll, 72 meters tall, with over 1,000 rooms inside it. It holds the Guinness World Record for the largest matryoshka doll ever built, a border crossing serious enough to need its own train wheel factory, built a theme park next door, entirely out of Russian folk toys. Harbin rebuilds its palace out of ice every winter and lets it melt every spring. 400 kilometers from Beijing, in Hebei province, another structure was built to unsettle people on purpose and never melts at all. The Hongyagu Glass Bridge. 488 meters long, suspended between two cliff faces, over 200 meters above the valley floor, currently the longest glass-bottomed suspension bridge on Earth. Most glass bridges are engineered to feel as solid and still as concrete. Hongyagu's engineers did the opposite. They built in a deliberate sway, a controlled, gentle movement underfoot that every visitor feels with every step across the glass. The wobble is not a flaw. It is the entire point. Guards are stationed at both ends for visitors who freeze halfway across and need help finishing the walk. Thousands cross it every day, specifically because it frightens them. A country that has built the tallest towers, the fastest trains, and the widest dams on the planet, also built a bridge whose only engineering goal was to make your knees shake. Before the final stretch, if this film is showing you a China you had never seen, take 1 second and subscribe to the Travel Index. One tap. It decides whether journeys like this keep getting made. Now, one last region, and one last structure that exists for no reason except joy. In the city of Fushun, in Liaoning Province, northeast China, a structure stands that makes no immediate practical sense and is precisely the better for it. The Ring of Life, a circular steel ring, over 150 meters in diameter, covered in thousands of LED panels that illuminate the structure at night in patterns of light and color. It stands in the middle of a public plaza as a pure monument, a statement that a city built around heavy industry chose to celebrate its future with light and geometry, rather than a statue of a general on a horse. A coal town raised a halo of light, for no practical reason at all, which may be the most human structure in this entire video. In Xinjiang, the provincial capital, another structure asked the same question and landed on the opposite answer: the Fangyuan Building. 24 stories, shaped precisely like an ancient Chinese coin, a circular tower with a square void cut straight through its center, the same round sky, square earth geometry that Chinese coinage carried for 2,000 years. Its architect also designed Taipei 101, once the tallest building on Earth. This one is regularly named one of the ugliest buildings in the world. Liaoning Province, two structures apart, a halo of light called the most human thing in this video, and a coin-shaped tower called one of the ugliest buildings on it, both raised by the same impulse. A city does not need permission to build something with no purpose except to be looked at. One province over, nature built something no city could ever compete with. On the border with North Korea, the extinct volcano of Changbai Mountain holds a crater lake at its summit, Tianjin, Heaven Lake, over 2,000 meters above sea level, and, at its deepest point, deeper than a 100-story building is tall. Its waters are sapphire blue on a clear day, and gone completely, swallowed by cloud, on every other kind of day. Locals say you do not choose to see Tianjin. Tianjin chooses to show itself to you. A ring of light, a coin-shaped tower, a lake at the top of a volcano that decides for itself whether it wants to be seen. And beyond the cities, China belongs to things that were here first. China is not only a country of cities, megastructures, and manufacturing. It is one of the most ecologically complex nations on Earth. The giant panda survives in the wild only in the mountain forests of 3 provinces. Fewer than 2,000 individuals exist in the wild. The snow leopard stalks the rocky ridges of the Tibetan Plateau and Xinjiang's Tian Shan Mountains, at altitudes most predators cannot survive. China's territory holds, by some estimates, as much as half of the world's snow leopard population, an animal so rarely observed that it was called the ghost cat for centuries. The Chinese giant salamander is the largest amphibian on Earth, capable of growing to nearly 2 meters in length. It has existed in the rivers of southern China for 170 million years, surviving the extinction event that killed the dinosaurs. It is now critically endangered. The crested ibis, reduced to just 7 individual birds in a single tree in Shaanxi Province in 1981, has been brought back through a government recovery program to a current population of over 9,000 birds. From 7 birds in one tree to 9,000 birds across the country. It is one of the most successful wildlife recoveries in conservation history. Not all recoveries succeeded. The Yangtze River dolphin, the baiji, existed only in the Yangtze River. It had survived in that river for 20 million years. It was declared functionally extinct in 2006. The last confirmed sighting was in 2002. The Yangtze finless porpoise, the baiji's surviving relative, is critically endangered, with around 1,200 individuals remaining in the river, a number that for the first time in a generation is rising. A country that lost the baiji is now counting every porpoise in the river by name. What humans break, humans sometimes learn to repair. And no repair China has attempted is larger than the last one in this film, replumbing the country itself. China's north is dry, China's south is wet. This imbalance has shaped Chinese civilization for 4,000 years. In 2002, China began its solution, the South to North Water Diversion Project, the largest water transfer infrastructure project in human history. 3 canal systems will eventually carry enough water northward per year to supply the entire population of several large European countries. The eastern route, completed in 2013, runs along the ancient Beijing-Hangzhou Grand Canal, the oldest and longest artificial waterway in the world, sections of which were first dug over 25 centuries ago. The central route, completed in 2014, carries water from a reservoir in Hubei province to Beijing, entirely by gravity, requiring no pumping because the reservoir sits at a higher elevation than the capital. A nation that moves rivers between its own regions, the way other countries move freight. You have now reached the edges of this country, the Mongolian steppe, the rare earth beneath it, and a desert taught to grow grass again. The desert of 12,000 mirrors, and the straw grids that saved a railway 600 kilometers away. The Silk Road frontier of Xinjiang, its unexplained dead, a lake in the mountains where 4 countries almost touch, and the highest border crossing on Earth. The railway that breathes, and the mirror lake it climbs past to get there. Hainan's tropical coast, and its spaceport, and a waterfall shared by treaty with another country entirely. 4,000 kilometers north, the ice city of Harbin, built from a frozen river every single winter. The Arctic town beyond it, where the sky itself sometimes turns green, and the border town, where every train has its wheels changed by hand. A bridge built to shake on purpose, a ring of light, and a coin-shaped tower, raised for no reason except to be seen, and a volcano's lake that decides for itself whether it wants to be seen at all. And the animals, the panda in its mountain forest, the snow leopard on its ridge, above the valley where the train breathes oxygen. No country on Earth contains this range inside a single border, and there is one more place. It is not on any map of China, because it is not on the Earth at all. You already saw where it began. That stretch of Hainan coastline, the one built for duty-free shopping and equatorial rocket launches, is where every piece of what comes next actually left the ground. 400 kilometers above the planet, the Tiangong space station, the palace in the sky, completes a full lap of the world every 90 minutes. When the United States barred China by law from the International Space Station, China responded the way it has responded throughout this video. It built its own. 3 modules, assembled in orbit, a permanent crew of 3. The only space station in the sky today, built and operated by a single nation. Somewhere below it, every 90 minutes, the fishing village that became a tech capital. The desert of 12,000 mirrors. The train that breathes for its passengers. The dam that holds back a river. A country that spent this entire video building upward until it ran out of planet. The old China and the new China are not 2 different places. They are the same place, happening at the same time, on the ground, and 400 kilometers above it. Whatever you believe China was before this series, it is still more than that. If this series gave you a new perspective on China, leave a comment below with the one place from any of these films you would most like to see in person. The next journey is already on your screen. I will see you there.